What's going on, everyone? Look at these stats. 23 points, 15 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 blocks, 82% from field goal range. 14 points, 17 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, 87% from field goal range. 17 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 blocks, 72% from field goal range. Jalen Duren is looking like an absolute star and looking like the guy that's going to be the next great big man in this league. I mean, dude, this kid is 19 years old. This season so far, it's been 3 games, so, don't want to jump the gun too much here, but through 3 games, this kid is averaging 18 points, 15 rebounds, 4 assists, 2.5 blocks, and 80% from the field. This guy is looking like prime Dwight Howard. It's year 2 for this guy, and he's looking remarkable, right? He's averaging 33 minutes per game in the 3 games in which he's played. He's only shot 10 shots on average per game, but when you're shooting 80%, it's really easy to get to 18 points, right? It's really easy to get to that when you're basically not missing a shot. Even free throws, he's shooting the free throws very well, 75% for a big man. That is excellent, considering historically most big men are not great free throw shooters. It's usually something that's a real standout when you look at this center is shooting 70%, right? It's like, that's great. But speaking on Duren, this was a kid that showed some potential last year, right? I mean, not to this level in which he's going off, but he did. He showed a lot of potential. And Detroit is a very young team that has a lot of potential. They got some really nice pieces. I still think that there are some question marks about some of the young guys, and we'll see how they progress. But the Jalen Duren emergence is huge for Detroit and putting them on the map as one of the best young cores going forward. Cade Cunningham has showed flashes and moments of just absolute brilliance, right? And through 3 games this season, he's really kind of stepped into his own a little bit more. You're starting to see the progress each season. This season, he's averaging 22 points, 3 rebounds, and 8.3 assists. Again, he's extremely young, too. It's his second year in the league. He's 22. He's got great size at 6'6", 220 pounds for a point guard, shooting guard combo. So you have with him Jalen Duren. Now you got Asar Thompson, which he should be at some point a real stud for them. I mean, he's already shown flashes of that. You have Jaden Ivey, who, he can go off and get some buckets. He's not been like super standout-ish, and he's had kind of a couple shacked in the full moments, but he's a guy that I do think should start coming into his own. Again, 21 years old, second year in the league. Like, he has a lot of upside and potential. But they have a nice young core. They have some nice young pieces, but it's looking right now like Jalen Duren may end up being that center cornerstone for the Detroit Pistons. Like, he might be the guy that is untouchable for Detroit in the foreseeable future. This guy he's just been fantastic. And Detroit has a winning record right now. They're 2-1 on the season. Again, 3 games in. But they've had some good games. And some of these games that they've played that they've won are games that they last year would have lost. Right? Like some of these like ups and downs games, kind of having these moments where it's like, it looks like, they're gonna blow this here down and they've stayed the course, they've done their job, and they've been able to pull out and squeeze out these wins, right? I mean, that Bulls game, they were great in that game. I mean, pretty much start to finish, and then in that fourth quarter, really just kind of pulled away, right? They outscored them by 9 points or whatever in that fourth quarter. That's a team that is going to be capable of winning many games, right? That's a team that when you see a team really kind of just quarter by quarter start having success in doing their job, and then to be able to close it out at the end for such a young team is impressive. I know some people might be looking at that and going, man, it's like that's what you're supposed to. Again, it's easier said than done, especially when you're playing some of the teams that they played, right? And especially like we'll look at the Bulls game, right? Because that's a good example. They win the first quarter, they dominate the second quarter, right? They have a 13-point lead going into the third quarter. They lose that third quarter and allow Chicago to make that game much more manageable, to a point where, again, Detroit last season might have lost that game, where, you're up 13, you're going into the fourth up, 7, right? And you got a team in Chicago that has guys in DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine who can just go off, especially when Zach LaVine's dropping 51 and DeRozan still gives you 20, right? Like, that's a game that you can look at and go, yeah, Detroit in the past might have lost that game or would have lost that game. But instead, what do? They go and they win that fourth quarter in dominant fashion. I love that. That's what you want to see from a young team. And to have the anchor on both sides of the basketball, because he's getting after it on the defensive side also. To have that anchor on both sides of the basketball in Duren, I think is huge for the Detroit Pistons, right? The one loss that they have was a tough loss to the Miami Heat, and which, again, in the fourth quarter, they won that quarter. And they ended up losing the game by 1 point. Right? So it's good to see this team bounce back, start putting it together, and should only improve as time goes on. Right? This is a team that should, as they progress through this season, you should start to see the continued growth. Now, is Duren going to be able to continue what he's doing here? I don't know. Time will tell, right? Is he going to be able to maintain and sustain this at 19 years old? That might be a bit of a tough task to ask of a 19-year-old kid to basically be 18 and 15, right? I mean, he's definitely, if he keeps at least the rebounding up, he's going to get the rebound title at 19 years old. Again, it's that much more impressive when you look at this kid is 19, and again, you look at, we'll talk about the last game too here briefly, in Charlotte, right? Because it touched on the Heat game, touched on the Bulls game, the Charlotte game. And look, I understand some people might look at it as they lost to the Heat, which, they're many people's eyes a contender, right? They were just in the NBA Finals. So they lost the contender by 1 point. And some people might look at it as, they blew out Charlotte and then they blew out the Bulls, two teams that are at best a play-in team. So, but that's their job. That's the job of a good team, right? A good team, when they play another good team, it's a coin flip, right? It's just who executes better. Miami's a team that's more disciplined, more experienced, veteran-led, as opposed to this young roster, right? But then they go and they play a team like Charlotte, who they should beat by, double digits, and beat them by, 12? It's double digits. And then go and play a team like Chicago, which is a good team. They're not a great team, but they're a good team, right? I'm not super, so I think Chicago will be tearing it down before the season's over, but still, they're a team that can win some games. And, in most scenarios, previous years, Detroit would have been a gimme win for them. And instead, Detroit goes in and handles business and gets the W. They're winning on the road. They're winning at home. They're doing everything that you need from this team. And again, you look at the Charlotte game, Pistons come out, dominate that first quarter, up 11, end up tailing back and losing the second quarter, 7-point game going in a half. They weather the third quarter, end up winning that by 1, get into the fourth quarter, win that quarter. Once again, they win 3 out of 4 quarters. That's how you're going to be a very good team in this league. And again, can they sustain this? That's going to be the biggest thing, right? Because a lot of these guys are so young. Is Cade Cunningham needs to continue to take those strides, needs to continue to grow, right? He still has like some inconsistency moments, but again, he's extremely young. He'll figure it out. Again, Ivy hasn't been great, right? We need him to be a little better, a little more consistent. That would be nice for a team such as Detroit, right? But like I said, as this season progresses and as we move into future seasons and these guys start maturing, start getting the experience, it'd be nice to see them maybe squeeze into the play-in at least, even if they don't get into the playoffs, right? To just get into the play-in where it's playoff level basketball, I think can go a long way for them. Give them that experience. Even if they get blown out, it's about getting there to develop that understanding, right? Like, look at a team like OKC back in the day with James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Russell Westbrook, right? They go from team not making the playoffs here's a team that's in the playoffs, losing the first round. Get next year, losing the second round. Get to the next year, losing the conference finals. Get to the next year, losing the NBA finals. And it just felt like if that team, Sam Presti would have kept that team together and just paid James Harden, that it was inevitable that they would have won an NBA championship. So Detroit can kind of learn from that mistake, but also kind of go through those motions, right? So this year, right? Last year, you're terrible. You're getting a top draft pick. This season, you're going in and you make the play-in, let's say, right? Again, hopefully they make the play-in. You get into the play-in. Let's say you get blown out in the play-in and it's just ugly, right? And you just take a good old-fashioned behind the barn whooping. That's good. That's fine. You need that, right? Especially with such a young team. You go in there, you take that whooping, but you got the experience. You got a little feel of what playoff basketball feels like. Yes, it's not the playoffs, but the play-in, that's the whole point, right? Like you're fighting for your lives to get into the playoffs. So you get that atmosphere. You get that competition. You get that team that is doing everything they can to not lose. If you win that game, then even better. But even if you lose, it's a good loss for a young team that needs that experience, right? And, I really like what we're seeing here, right? I really like, what this team is starting to bring to the table. And I really do think if Cunningham, Thompson, and Duren can really kind of continue on the trajectory that they're going, and then you add in like a Jaden Ivey or whatever, whether he continues to come off the bench or they start him in spots or whatever, and if he can continue to grow and get into his spots, and the rest of these young guys, the rest of this young core, this is a team that could be a problem in the next 3 years, right? This is a team in 3 years I could see at the top of the standings just really causing mayhem in the Eastern Conference, and maybe even get back to an NBA Finals. It's been a while, right? So time will tell. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass a question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel about Duren? Do you love what he's doing? Do you think he can maintain this and keep this up? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below.